Hello everybody and welcome back to LELB Society. I'm Dr. Hariri, and in this time I'm going to narrate or give a presentation on one of my articles on this topic: declarative versus procedural knowledge in second language learning. And I'm the author of this article, as stated here, author Dr. Mohammad Hossein Hariri Asl. And I'm going to skip this table of contents, and I'm going to share the link to this article in the description area right down below this video, so that you can just click on that and study this article in more depth. Okay. So, background. Following a brief history of the emergence of the declarative versus and or procedural distinction in the study of second languages, a number of constructs are elucidated. Paradis, 2009. The crucial distinction between lexicon and vocabulary, what it means to rely more or less on declarative memory, the nature of the continuum from controlled to automatic processing, the nature of the differing structures of metalinguistic knowledge and implicit linguistic competence, various indicators of metalinguistic explicitness in second language performance, and the macro and also micro-anatomical levels of cerebral representation. Let's see what declarative knowledge is. Internalized rules and memorized chunks of the language constitute the what of the learner's system or declarative knowledge. McLaughlin, 1987. Nick Ellis, 1994, as cited in Elder, Ellis, Erlem, Lowen, Flip, and Reinder, 2009, suggests that declarative rules can have top-down influences on perception, in particular by making relevant features salient, thus enabling learners to notice them and to notice the gap between the input and their existing linguistic competence. Page 16. Such a position suggests that implicit and explicit learning processes work together in L2 acquisition, and that they are dynamic, taking place consciously but transiently, with enduring effects on implicit knowledge. What about procedural knowledge? Procedural knowledge consists of knowing how to employ strategies and procedures to process second language data from acquisition and use. Procedural knowledge accounts for how learners accumulate and automatize rules and how they restructure their internal representations to match the target language. McLaughlin, 1987. According to Barquazen and Ellis, 2005, quote, "What counts in the study of interlanguage development is learners' procedural knowledge, and this can only be investigated by means of naturally occurring data." End quote, page 48. Anderson's ACT model. Anderson's 1976, as cited in Ellis 2008, adaptive control of thought model rests on the distinction between declarative and procedural knowledge. He characterized the essential differences in the form of three assumptions. 1. Declarative knowledge seems to be possessed in all or none manner, whereas procedural knowledge seems to be something that can be partially possessed. 2. One acquires declarative knowledge suddenly by being told, whereas one acquires procedural knowledge gradually by performing the skill. 3. One can communicate one's declarative knowledge verbally, but not one's procedural knowledge. Anderson, 1976, page 117, as cited in Ellis, 2008. The transition of declarative to procedural knowledge takes place in 3 stages, as stated by Ellis 2008. 1. In the declarative stage, information is stored as facts for which there is no ready-made activation procedure. 2. The associative stage, because it is difficult to use declarative knowledge, the learner tries to sort the information into more efficient production sets by means of composition. It means collapsing several discrete productions into one, and proceduralization, that is, applying a general rule to a particular instance. Anderson 1983, as cited in Ellis 2008, notes that errors are particularly likely during the associative stage. 3. In the autonomous stage, in which procedures become increasingly automated, or automatic actually, the mind continues both to generalize productions and also to discriminate more narrowly the occasions when specific productions can be used. Ellis 1985, as cited in McLaughlin 1987, categorized the processes involved in using second language knowledge into learning, production, and communication strategies. Learning strategies relate to the acquisition of procedural knowledge rather than its use. Production and communication strategies refer to language use. Production strategies refer to those strategies used by learners to realize communicative goals. According to Schmidt 2002, some information processing theories suggest that language, like other skilled activity, is first acquired through intentional learning of what is called declarative knowledge, and that through practice the declarative knowledge can become procedural knowledge. As Ellis 2008 has said, procedural knowledge is unidirectional, that is, automatization or automatization of one skill, such as listening, does not directly assist automatization of a different skill, such as speaking. However, automatization of one skill may have an indirect effect on a different skill by improving and strengthening declarative knowledge, which is a bidirectional, that is, it can be utilized in the development of different skills. According to McLaughlin 1990, it is argued that practice can lead to improvement in performance as sub-skills become automated. But it is also possible for increased practice to create conditions for restructuring with attendant decrements in performance as learners recognize their internal representational framework. Page 113. Explicit L2 learning. Explicit language learning is necessarily a conscious process and is generally intentional as well. Elder and others, 2009. Explicit knowledge, in particular lexical knowledge, that is, knowledge of form meaning connections, may be less susceptible to the influence of frequency, that is, implicit knowledge. Although vocabulary learning normally requires frequent exposure to the words to be learned, it sometimes happens that a single encounter suffices for a new word, form, meaning, connection to be remembered forever. And on the other hand, that many exposures sometimes do not result in acquisition. Thus, frequency may have a differential impact depending on the type of knowledge concerned. Halstigen, 2002. Implicit L2 learning. Implicit language learning takes place without either intentionality or awareness. Elder and others, 2009. However, there is controversy as to whether any learning is possible without some degree of awareness. To be more precise, it is frequently claimed that learning without awareness is impossible. Brewer, 1974, Dawson and Shell, 1987, Lewis and Anderson, 1985, as cited in Schmidt, 1990. According to Declarative, 2003, as cited in Doughty and Long, 2003, it is important to distinguish implicit learning from two concepts it is often confused with in the second language literature: inductive learning and implicit memory. Inductive learning, going from the particular to the general, from examples to rules, and implicit learning, learning without awareness, are two orthogonal concepts. When students are encouraged to find rules for themselves by studying examples in a text, learning is inductive and explicit. When children acquire linguistic competence of their native language without thinking about its structure, their learning is inductive and implicit. Skill acquisition theories. Skill acquisition theories of language acquisition draw on the distinction between declarative and procedural knowledge. Anderson, 1983, as cited in Ellis, 2008. Anderson, 1993, as cited in Cook, 2008, has proposed a cognitive behaviorist model called ACTR, which sees learning as building up response strengths through a twofold division into declarative memory, individual pieces of information, and procedural memory, procedures for doing things. As declarative facts get better known, they are gradually incorporated into procedures, and several procedures are combined into one, thus cutting down on the amount of memory involved. Practice. According to Declarative and Sokolsky, 1996, there are two different views about the concept of practice. On the one hand, if adult SLA, second language acquisition, is an explicit learning process, then one would expect to find the same patterns of learning as for other cognitive skills. They, 1996, continue, quote, knowledge acquired in declarative or explicit form is then transformed and automatized through analogical reasoning and specific kinds of practice, end quote, page 614. On the other hand, if SLA in adults draws on a specific module of the mind or on more general implicit learning mechanisms, then neither explicit learning nor practice in production play an important role. That is, acquisition is the implicit process of generating linguistic competence from input and the capacity to produce results from this acquired competence. Krasher, 1982, 1985, 1994, as cited in Declarative and Sokolsky, 1996. According to Ellis, 1988, quote, the whole concept of controlled practice in language teaching should be reconsidered, end quote, page 1. And the essence of the controlled practice stage, or corresponding to the associative or procedural stage in skill learning theory, is to facilitate a shift in the language learner's from relying on declarative rules to procedural knowledge by developing efficient procedures of performing the skill. Dornier, 2009. As Declarative 1997 has said, quote, initial practice of a task has very different effects. Proceduralization compared to subsequent practice, automatization of declarative knowledge, end quote, page 211. In this response, Lightbound, 1985, as cited in Ellis 2008, maintains practice does not make perfect necessarily. End quote. To change behavior, that is, develop automatic processes, it is necessary to provide practice of the actual behavior itself. In the case of language learning, behavior must entail attempts to communicate. In this regard, communicative practice serves as a device for proceduralizing knowledge of linguistic structures that have been first presented declaratively. Instruction that incorporates such practice can be seen as an attempt to intervene directly in the process by which declarative knowledge is proceduralized. Declarative 1998, as cited in Ellis 2008. Automatic processing contrasts with controlled processing. Schriffen and Schneider, 1977, as cited in Ellis 2003, where activation of nodes involves attentional control. A key difference between automatic and controlled processing is that whereas the former occurs rapidly and in parallel form, the latter occurs more slowly and functions serially. According to McLaughlin and Heredia, 1996, as cited in Ellis 2003, automatic processing involves the activation of certain nodes in memory each time the appropriate inputs are present. This activation is a learned response that has been built up through consistent mapping of the same input to the same pattern of activation over many trials. Page 214. In terms of self-correction and monitor, Krashen, 1994, maintains that the conditions for monitor use are not fully satisfied when explicit knowledge is used, and there is not enough acquired competence for extensive implicit correction. Johnson, 1988-1996, as cited in Ellis 2008, drew on skill learning theory to justify practice from another perspective. He emphasized the importance of feedback in their learning process, suggesting that the instructional sequence is best seen as one of learn toward perform and then learn again, rather than the traditional sequence of learn and then perform. Okay, during or perhaps after the perform stage, learners must have the opportunity to receive feedback. 1996, as cited in Ellis 2008, proposed a sequence of practice activities designed to lead a learner from accuracy, that is, performance based on declarative knowledge, to fluency, that is, i.e., performance based on procedural knowledge. This sequence involves controlled drills, meaningful drills, guided meaningful practice, structure-based free sentence composition, structure-based discourse composition, and free discourse. And now conclusion. Skill acquisition theories are problematic in two related respects. Ellis, 2008. First, as Michel and Miles 2004 commented, "The route followed by L2 learners is not convincingly explained by such approaches." Page 128. Second, it is difficult to accept that the acquisition of all L2 features begins with declarative knowledge. There are two positions in terms of the kind of interface between declarative and procedural knowledge. According to the strong interface position, declarative memory can convert into procedural memory, yet according to the weak interface position, declarative memory can help adjust the neural circuits in which procedural memory is housed. Elder and others, 2009. Paradis, 2004, as cited in Elder and others, 2009, is adamant that explicit knowledge does not convert into implicit knowledge. Acquisition may commence with an explicit rule, controlled processing, but subsequently the learner acquires implicit computational procedures involving automatic processing. He proposed that metalinguistic knowledge can assist the development of implicit competence, but only indirectly through focusing attention on the items that need to be practiced and through monitoring. According to Eysenck, 2001, as cited in Ellis 2006, recent changes in the definition of both pairs of terms have brought them closer together, making it increasingly difficult to decide on the extent to which different theories actually make significantly different predictions. End quote, page 213. In the case of SLA, quote, "The amount of L2 research narrowly focused on the implicit-explicit distinction is quite limited, not only in the number of studies, but also in duration and in scope of the learning target." End quote. Decaser 2003, page 336, as cited in Elder and others, 2009. And we come to the end of this article, and you can see the references that I have used to write this article. There are 19 sources. That's right. As you can see, I'm Dr. Hariri, Dr. Mohammad Hossein Hariri Asl, and I have published so far 3,900 posts and articles on my website at the LELB Society, and I'm not the only author, by the way. Thank you very much for your attention, and take care. Bye-bye, everybody.